Binash Acharya says, is it a possibility that Indians living in Canada might be deported back to India? So that cannot happen to Indian origin Canadians who are citizens of Canada. But there's definitely a large number of Indians who are working in Canada who don't have Canadian citizenship. They may be on various kinds of visas, either student visas or work visas or whatever. And yes, the relationship right now between India and Canada is pretty bad. All thanks to one person, Justin Trudeau. Uh, and I don't think it has reached the bottom yet. I think there's more to come, and we haven't seen the worst of it yet. That's the feeling I get. Okay, so a lot has happened, right? Uh, India withdrew its ambassador and six or so of its diplomats from Canada. So we just have a bare minimum staff now at the Indian embassy in Canada. And India also expelled six Canadian diplomats, including the top six, which are the top six diplomats, including the High Commissioner, acting ambassador. So this was a pretty drastic move that India did. And then later the Western press tried to spin it and said that Canada expelled six Indian diplomats. It's not the case. That's a lie. That's complete fabrication. That's propaganda. India first withdrew the diplomats, Indian diplomats. We then expelled six Canadian diplomats. And then the Western media started spinning the story around. But that is what has happened. And there's been a lot of acrimony. The entire Canadian government has been involved from top to bottom in making statements against India, including the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, made a deposition against Canadian Parliament or whatever it was, some kind of committee, in which he had to admit that he has no evidence that supports his claims of India doing whatever, and Indian diplomats being involved in, allegedly involved in some illegal activity or other. He has absolutely no evidence of it. He says it isn't evidence, it's intelligence. Intelligence is words, it's hearsay. It's not actionable evidence. It's not evidence that can stand scrutiny in a court of law. So he's bluffing, he's lying, he's prevaricating, he's absolutely outright lying. He's been caught lying, he's been caught red-handed. Now, things may get worse. I mean, the question we have to ask ourselves is, why have the Canadians chosen this time to do this? And what are they trying to achieve by nuking their relationship with India? India won't suffer economically. Canada will suffer economically from this. Okay? Especially if India stops doing trade with Canada. It's not going to hurt us, it's going to hurt them. It's a smaller economy. They import many important things from India, and it will affect them badly. At least it will hurt them to some extent. It won't hurt us. No, why is Trudeau doing all this? He started this entire business about a year ago when he came to the G20 summit in Delhi, right? And he made some allegations at the time that India was involved in bumping off some ragtag third-rate terrorist, Canadian terrorist of Indian origin, a terrorist who had tried to immigrate to Canada illegally using forged documents, and he was still given his visa request was denied twice at least, but eventually he ends up getting citizenship, and he's a terrorist. He's a Canadian terrorist of Indian origin. So all that happened. Now, why now? Why suddenly all of this now? I think, look, Canada is a member of the Five Eyes coalition, which is the US and four of its closest vassals: the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. The five Anglospheric nations, English-speaking nations. Now, the Five Eyes are the closest allies of the US, the closest vassals, and it's in these five nations that most anti-India elements are harbored and given refuge. A number of anti-India separatists and terrorists are US citizens. A large number of these Khalistani terrorists and supporters and sympathizers and separatists are Canadian citizens. There's a significant presence of these elements in the UK and Australia as well. Maybe to some extent in New Zealand as well. Maybe to a smaller extent. New Zealand is very small, population-wise. So these nations are used by the US to prod and poke and pressurize India in a variety of ways whenever required. And it is impossible that Trudeau would take such actions without the explicit approval of his bosses in Washington, Maryland. So I think this is a pressure tactic used by the US. Uh, the US has been, ever since the Democrats came to power, the US has been after India, 2020 onwards, especially after 22, February 22, when India refused to condemn the Russian military operation in Ukraine. And India remained neutral, and we have been buying Russian oil ever since in very large quantities. So we haven't kowtowed and pressed our forehead to the ground in front of the feet of the West. We haven't done that. We have stood straight. And that is a big problem for the West. And they tried their best to interfere in our elections in 24. And to some extent, it worked. Mr. Modi did not get a full majority. He got 240 ish, which is, he's now running a coalition government. But he still came back to power, third successive time. Uh, so the ideal scenario, see, there are multiple scenarios. The problem the US has with India is that India is a growing economy. It fulfills certain criteria. India is a large population, the largest population in the world, large land area with a tremendous amount of resources. That's number two. Number three, the fastest growing large economy in the world. Number four, we are soon going to be the third largest economy in the world. By 2050, we'll be the second largest economy in the world, 2047, 2050. And by the end of the century, we'll be the largest economy if things continue the way they are. So that's a big problem for them. They are the existing hegemon, and an existing hegemon will never allow a potential hegemon to emerge. They will nip that in the bud. So that's why they're going after India. So there's a number of ways they go after India. They have a lot of assets within India, people who are compromised. We have 100 million roughly foreign infiltrators who are living in India. They can be activated at any time they want. There is the Project Cave that's going on, Project Cookie Land for Christ, an artificial Christian nation that will be that they want to create out of Manipur, Mizoram, parts of Bangladesh, and parts of Burma. Then there is East Pakistan that has been recreated by the Americans. There are all these media outlets that they fund, NGOs that they fund, allegedly political parties that they allegedly fund, and so on. So the Americans have so many assets in the subcontinent, in the region, within India, lots of people who are working for a foreign power, and so on. There is industrial scale religious conversion happening in various parts of India. The Tirupati thing happened recently. The Tirupati temple is encircled. You look at the map, you'll see it's encircled by religious uh, uh, buildings of other religions. So India is under siege. India's culture and civilization is under siege. They want to uproot and wipe it out. The best case scenario for them is for India and China to go to war, and they could induce such a war if they can. And the ideal situation is that India and China blow each other to bits, and nothing is left, and then America can focus fully on Russia. That's the best possible scenario in the short term. The second best possible scenario in the short term for the US is India and China again go to war somehow. India is destroyed, China is greatly weakened, and then the Americans can once again focus on Russia and take care of Russia. These are short term best case scenarios for the US. And third best case scenario is regime change in India, and then they can work on India whichever way they want. The long term end game for the US, for India, is the balkanization of India. Okay, every state becomes a separate nation. You can have a Dravidian coalition of nations in the south. That project is going on very, very strongly. Various other nations, Jammu Kashmir, they would like to secede. They would like to see various parts of Northeast India, Far East India become separate countries. Every part of India should be a separate country, ideally a non-Hindu country that they can individually control, and then they can they can control the destiny of these various population groups. That's what the US would like. Okay, and please understand that they have no hatred for India. It's nothing personal. It's just business, as the Godfather would say. Vito Corleone is just business. Okay, nothing personal. Don't take it personally. I have nothing against you. It's just business. So that's how it goes. That's how you play the game of geopolitics as a great power, as a superpower. So all of that is going on, and now coming back to Canada. Okay, now you understand what's happening. So Canada is a tool that they use to apply pressure on India. They want to create a certain image of India. India is a rogue state like Iran or North Korea. We send our assassins to other countries and kill innocent people. That's the kind of image they want to create. Of course, the Americans can do that. They can kill Osama bin Laden in whatever country in Pakistan. They can kill Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen, their own citizen and his teenage son. They can kill whoever they want, wherever they want. That's okay. They have the right to. Israel can kill whoever they want, various terrorists in various parts of the world, with impunity at will. I'm not saying Israel should not. They should. There is no place for terrorism in the world, so it's okay to do that. But India cannot touch terrorists who are after India. We don't have the right to do that, and their media will ensure that they paint India in a very horrible light. So all of that, that's what they're doing. They want to make Modi look like a dictator. They want to put him in the same league as Kim Jong Un and Putin and Xi Jinping, or maybe even worse than that. Make him look like a worst case scenario compared to these guys. And they want to make India look like an intolerant, backward uh, nation with backsliding democracy and lack of religious freedom and all that. And by creating this image, they can then justify whatever they do with India. Maybe a regime change, maybe balkanization, whatever. So that's what they're doing. And so Canada is being used for that. Now the relationship between India and Canada may get worse. And yes, uh, Justin Trudeau recently in the deposition, he said that India is he alleged that India is behind shootings and God knows what kind of crimes in Canada. So it looks like he's setting the stage for accusing random Indian origin people of being terrorists and being proxies of the RANW, especially holders of Indian passports. So it may happen. It may happen that people in India, people in Canada who are of Indian origin with Indian passports may be jailed, may be prosecuted with may have criminal cases thrown against them. And the lightest thing that could happen is deportation back to India. Something much worse may happen, which is imprisonment in Canada for God knows how long. So yeah, things are bad and things could get even worse between India and Canada. That is the situation right now. Overall, India is going to face increasing heat from the West in the coming years. It's not going to be easy for India. It's going to be very tough for the government of India, for Prime Minister Modi. The Americans, the West may try to effect regime change, as in bringing the coalition government down, perhaps by inducing certain coalition members to withdraw support or whatnot. So many things are possible. They have so many tools in their toolkit. So it's going to be a tough road ahead for India. I think it's going to be almost a miracle for this government, the Modi government, to stay in power till 2029. And yeah, India is going to face a lot of heat, a lot of pressure from the West. And let's see how things go. The Chinese are currently in the process of sweet talking India. Uh, the Chinese ambassador and the embassy in India are putting out very flattering statements every day, multiple times a day. The Global Times, which has been stridently anti-India for decades, it is putting out rather benign statements about India and so on. So the Chinese are trying to sweet talk India. So that's a whole different question and different issue. But yeah, it's part of the overall context in which we are discussing these matters.